Atlanta built a city on a magma bubble. Not a metaphor, not a figure of speech. Actual magma, frozen underground 300 million years ago and still slowly pushing upward, while 4 million people go about their day directly on top of it. The longest underwater cave system in America? Under Florida. Not fully mapped until 2 divers swam 35,000 feet through pitch-black tunnels in 2007. 7 hours in, 14 more decompressing on the way out. Virginia had an active volcano, still standing. Most people picture the East Coast as settled, fixed. Old money, old cities, old coastline. That's the version they sell you. The real version is stranger, way stranger. And today we're breaking down 50 facts that'll permanently change how you see this place. Let's get into it.
Smart people, subscribe. Hit that button before the next fact drops.
Fact 50. The coastline with no foundation. Everyone pictures the Outer Banks as permanent. It isn't. 200 miles of barrier islands with zero bedrock underneath them. Nothing solid. Just sand and loose sediment sitting above a shallow continental shelf, slowly walking inland as sea levels shift. Scientists started flagging threshold collapse risk back in the early 2000s. Nobody really listened. 1 serious storm. That's the number. 1. Research shows accelerated sea level rise could push these islands inland 2.5 times faster than they're already moving. Already moving. This isn't a future problem. It's a slow-motion, present tense one. The most visited stretch of coastline on the East Coast is, technically speaking, a sand pile. Waiting. Fact 49. The earthquake nobody talks about. August 31st, 1886. Charleston, South Carolina. Between magnitudes 6.9 and 7.3, nobody's completely certain because seismographs weren't standardized yet. What they do know, people felt it in Boston, Chicago, New Orleans, Cuba, all simultaneously. 60 dead, 2,000 buildings collapsed, damage exceeding $1 billion in today's money. Then, it kept going. 435 recorded aftershocks, not over days, over 30 years. 3 decades of the ground reminding Charleston it wasn't finished. California gets all the earthquake press. Meanwhile, Charleston shook half a continent, and most people have never heard of it. The whole world is watching GBJ. What are you waiting for? Fact 48. The wilderness nobody developed. The Ace Basin, named after 3 rivers, Ashepoo, Combahee, Edisto. 1.6 million acres, about 350,000 formally protected. Marshland, swamps, old forest, barrier islands, sitting between Beaufort and Charleston, basically untouched, while everything around it got bulldozed into beachfront condos and resort hotels. Nobody planned it. Nobody sat down in 1970 and said, let's preserve this. It just survived, accidentally, by being slightly out of the way long enough for conservation money to show up. It's what the entire East Coast looked like before we got serious about changing it. Still there, hiding. Fact 47. The lakes that all face the same direction. Fly over the Carolinas and you'll see something that'll make you pull up Google Maps to confirm what you're looking at. Thousands of oval lakes, every single one oriented on the same northwest to southeast axis, like someone took a ruler and dragged it across 2 entire states. These are the Carolina Bays, and researchers have been arguing about them since the 1930s. Meteor impacts, prehistoric fish behavior, ancient tsunamis, glacial wind patterns. Current best explanation involves glacial winds and water erosion working together over thousands of years. And even that doesn't fully satisfy the people actively studying them. The sand ridges built up on their southeastern edges make everything weirder. Nature doesn't usually produce geometric consistency at this scale. Whatever made them, made thousands of them. Fact 46. The scientist buried on the mountain he died measuring. A scientist named Elisha Mitchell calculated the height of a North Carolina mountain using barometric pressure readings and a lot of patience. His answer? Roughly 6,672 feet. Modern satellites put Mount Mitchell at 6,684. He was within 12 feet in 1835. He went back in 1857 to verify his own numbers. Fell, died on the mountain. The state buried him at the summit. He spent his career proving one fact about one mountain. Died doing it. Never came back down. The Black Mountains kept him.
The whole world is watching GBJ. What are you waiting for?
Fact 45. The lights nobody has explained in 250 years. Brown Mountain, North Carolina. People have been reporting glowing orbs above the ridgeline since before America was a country. White ones, red ones, blue ones, floating up, drifting, disappearing. The USGS investigated in 1922 and landed on atmospheric light bending from cars and trains. Reasonable. Except the lights were heavily documented during the 1916 flood, the one that knocked out all power, stopped all train traffic, took out roads for weeks. So what were people seeing then? No clean answer. The official explanation doesn't survive contact with the historical record. That's why this one has been unsettling people for a quarter of a millennium and counting. Fact 44. The Ice Age that never left Vermont. Summit of Mount Mansfield, Vermont's highest point, at 4,393 feet. And sitting up there, completely out of place, is 200 acres of Arctic tundra that has no business being in New England. Left over from the last ice age, the glaciers retreated, this ecosystem didn't go with them. Stranded, isolated from every other Arctic environment in North America. Balsam bog, alpine bilberry. A growing season so short and wind so relentless that the whole thing has barely shifted in thousands of years. You don't need to fly to Labrador. Vermont kept a piece of it right there on the summit. Fact 43. The whale found 150 miles from the ocean. Railroad workers near Charlotte, Vermont, digging a rail bed, hit something in the blue clay about 10 feet down. A 12-foot beluga whale skeleton. Complete. Preserved. Charlotte sits 150 miles from the nearest ocean, 200 feet above sea level. The whale is 11,000 years old, from the period right after the last glaciers melted and the Champlain Valley briefly became an arm of the Atlantic. The whale died in that sea, got buried in marine sediment, got stranded on what eventually became dry land as the water retreated and the earth rebounded upward. A Vermont farmer's field used to be the ocean floor. The whale is the proof. Fact 42. The holes the devil drilled into the bedrock. Chapman Falls in Devil's Hopyard State Park, Connecticut. The water drops 60 feet into bedrock, and what's left underneath looks like it was machined. Dozens of perfectly cylindrical holes bored straight into solid rock, some small, some feet deep. The geometry is almost too clean. The actual mechanism is pothole drilling. Spinning currents trap stones in pools and rotate them for thousands of years, grinding downward. Slow, patient, relentless. Medieval settlers decided the devil made them himself. Honestly, more satisfying than the geology. Fact 41. The ridge that Pangea left behind. The Metacomet Ridge runs 100 miles from Connecticut up through Massachusetts. Some cliffs hit 700 feet, and it's a scar, literally, from when Pangea tore itself apart 200 million years ago. Massive basalt lava floods poured across the landscape as the supercontinent cracked, cooled into sheets. The softer rock around them eroded away over millions of years. What's left is what couldn't be worn down. You can put your hand on it, on a hiking trail in New England, on a rock that watched the world split open. Fact 40. The building that never got built. Rocky Hill, Connecticut, 1966. A bulldozer operator named Edward McCarthy is excavating land for a routine state building project when his blade hits something that doesn't feel right. Turned out to be early Jurassic sandstone, covered in around 2,000 prehistoric footprints, 200 million years old. most of them from Eubrontes giganteus, a three-toed carnivore built like a Dilophosaurus. The state stopped the project, built a park around the site instead. In 1991, Eubrontes became Connecticut's official state fossil. One bulldozer, one wrong-feeling scrape, one of the most significant dinosaur track sites in North America. The building never got built.
Fact 39. The easiest summit in New England. Rhode Island's state high point is Jeremoth Hill, 812 feet. The lowest summit in all of New England, and for years, somehow one of the harder ones to actually stand on. The access trail ran through private land. The landowner had a documented, consistent objection to hikers showing up on his property. Brown University bought the parcel and donated it to the state in 2014. Now there's a marked trail. 45 minutes of flat walking through the woods to stand on a hill you could mistake for a speed bump. Still counts on every summit list. Still draws people from out of state. Participation trophy of the bagging world. Absolutely counts. Fact 38. More coastline than it has any right to. Rhode Island is 37 by 48 miles. It has over 400 miles of tidal coastline, more per square mile than Maine, a state that is dramatically, obviously larger. The reason is Narragansett Bay. Around 18,000 years ago, glaciers carved deep channels into the landscape. When they melted, the ocean flooded every cove, inlet, and drowned river valley, turning what should have been a simple coastal edge into something massively jagged and indented. The glaciers didn't just reshape the terrain, they multiplied the coastline of a tiny state by a number that still surprises people when they actually look at a map. Fact 37. The high point under a trailer. Delaware's official highest point, the Ebright Azimuth, is a marker on a suburban sidewalk in Newcastle County. 447.85 feet, second lowest state high point in the country. In 1985, surveyors quietly discovered that a nearby mobile home park sits at 450.95 feet, almost 3 feet higher. Delaware's actual high point is technically underneath someone's trailer. The state has not updated the official designation. The irony has been sitting there 3 feet above the plaque for 40 years. Fact 36. 6 geological worlds in one afternoon. Maryland covers 12,407 square miles. Inside those square miles sit 6 completely distinct physiographic provinces. Drive 250 miles from Ocean City to Backbone Mountain, and you cross coastal sediments going thousands of feet into the continental shelf, billion-year-old metamorphic bedrock in the Piedmont, folded Paleozoic rock in the Appalachians, limestone, granite, schist, sandstone, all in an afternoon. The Maryland Geological Survey didn't coin the nickname America in miniature as a dig at the state's size. It was a geological observation. They meant it literally. Fact 35. The cliffs still giving up Megalodon teeth. Calvert Cliffs, western shore of the Chesapeake Bay. 100-foot walls running 24 miles along the water. And they're basically an open-air fossil museum from a period between 8 and 20 million years ago, when warm, shallow seas covered most of the region. Megalodon teeth wash out after storms. Walk the beach the morning after a big one, and you might find one. Over 600 ancient species identified here. First documented scientifically in 1685, before paleontology even existed as a formal field. The ocean preserved everything in one place for millions of years, and it's still handing things back. Fact 34. The canyon nobody meant to build. Providence Canyon in Georgia looks like someone airlifted a piece of Utah into the deep south. 150-foot walls, pink, orange, purple, white, wild enough to earn the name Little Grand Canyon. Before 1850, completely flat farmland. Poor agricultural practices stripped all the vegetation. Rainwater carved ditches. Erosion accelerated past any reasonable threshold. The walls still retreat 3 to 5 feet every single year.
One of the most visually striking geological features in the southeastern United States was created entirely by bad farming decisions. Georgia built a state park around the mistake.
Fact 33. The swamp, where the ground can't decide what it is. The Okefenokee, 438,000 acres along the Georgia-Florida border. Its name in the Hitchiti language means trembling earth. The name is accurate. 5 to 15 feet of spongy peat moss floating on top of water. Step anywhere and a ripple moves through the ground in every direction. It formed over 6,500 years in an ancient ocean basin, layers of compressed organic material that never fully completed the transition to solid land. The Earth here is still deciding. After 6,500 years, still deciding.
T-Fact 32. The magma bubble Atlanta built a city on. Stone Mountain, 825 feet above the Atlanta plain. Just a smooth gray dome sitting there looking unremarkable. That's the tip. The full structure is a quartz monzonite pluton, a mass of magma that forced its way up through the crust 300 million years ago, cooled underground before it could erupt, and has been slowly surfacing ever since as the softer rock around it erodes away. The structure extends 9 miles underground into neighboring Gwinnett County. Atlanta has been expanding suburbs directly on top of an ancient frozen magma chamber for decades. Most people living there have no idea what's underneath. The whole world is watching GBJ. What are you waiting for? Fact 31. The state with no real ground under it. Florida has no native igneous or metamorphic bedrock. None. The entire peninsula sits on miles of Cenozoic limestone and dolostone, compressed shells and skeletons of marine organisms accumulated over 50 million years. Limestone dissolves under acidic rainwater. Florida has had 50 million years of rainfall eating its own foundation from below. The result is a karsted landscape, hollow in ways that aren't visible from the surface. That's why sinkholes open up under houses, roads, swimming pools. The ground isn't resting on rock. It's resting on the slow decomposition of ancient ocean life. And some of those ceilings are thinner than anyone would like to know. Fact 30. The sinkhole with 34 million years of walls. Devil's Millhopper, just outside Gainesville, Florida. A sinkhole 120 feet deep and 500 feet across. Early settlers named it after a grist mill hopper, a funnel that takes things down and doesn't give them back. Walk the 132 steps down inside it, and you pass through 34 million years of exposed geological history in the rock faces on either side. Temperature drops noticeably as you descend. Small waterfalls run down the walls. It's one of those places where Florida's geology stops being background information and becomes the entire point. Fact 29. The spring hiding an Ice Age graveyard. Wakulla Springs, Florida. 200 to 300 million gallons of crystal clear water pushed out daily. In April 1973, during peak flood conditions, output hit 14,324 gallons per second, over 1.2 billion gallons in a single day. At 190 feet down inside the spring system, cave divers found fossilized remains of at least 10 Ice Age mammals, preserved down there in the dark while the water above them kept flowing for thousands of years. One of Florida's most productive freshwater springs is simultaneously an Ice Age fossil vault. The water keeps moving, the bones don't. Fact 28. The underwater maze nobody knows is there. The Wakulla-Leon Sinks cave system is the longest mapped underwater cave network in the United States. Over 45 miles of flooded passages, more than 22 of them sitting below 190 feet. In 2007, 2 divers swam 35,000 continuous feet through pitch-black tunnels, 7 hours moving forward through complete darkness.
then 14 more hours decompressing on the way back out. No natural light anywhere, no shortcuts, just flooded limestone and the awareness that the exit is miles behind you. The longest underwater cave in America is under North Florida. Most people driving through on I-10 have no idea it exists. Fact 27. The mountain that swallowed its own eruption. Mount Katahdin, 5,269 feet, northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail, 2,190 miles of walking that either ends or begins here, depending on which direction you started. Geologically, it's a laccolith, magma that injected itself into existing rock layers 400 million years ago, built pressure, pushed upward, and then stopped. Froze solid instead of breaking through. The mountain sitting at the end of the longest hiking trail in America is essentially a monument to energy that built up, almost released, and didn't. Still held there. Still waiting. Fact 26. The first sunrise in America. Cadillac Mountain, Acadia National Park, Maine, 1,530 feet. Built from pink granite that crystallized 420 million years ago. Its elevation, its eastern position, and the Earth's axial tilt combine to make this the first place in the contiguous United States to receive sunlight from early October through early March. People set alarms for 3 a.m., drive up in the dark, stand in the cold wind at the summit in the middle of winter just to be first. The mountain has existed since before complex land animals. Humans have been making that drive for as long as there have been humans here to make it. Fact 25. The tides that outpace every river on Earth. Eastport and Cobscook Bay, Maine. Daily tidal range 20 feet. The largest swing in the contiguous United States. Driven by resonance with the Bay of Fundy sitting just next door. On a single incoming flood tide, 160 billion tons of cold Atlantic seawater rushes in over 6 hours. That volume is more than 4 times the combined daily flow of every freshwater river on the entire planet, compressed into one tidal cycle, twice a day. Stand at the waterline and watch the mudflats disappear under you. The ocean doesn't ease in here. It arrives. Fact 24. The glacier that permanently rerouted a river. Pine Creek Gorge, Pennsylvania's Grand Canyon. 47 miles long. Walls dropping 1,450 feet through the Allegheny Plateau. And it shouldn't exist where it does. Around 20,000 years ago, the Laurentide ice sheet advanced far enough to completely block Pine Creek's original drainage path north. Water backed up, filled the valley, eventually found a low point on a ridge it had never crossed before, and spilled south. That overflow carved the gorge, permanently. The creek has been flowing the wrong direction ever since. A glacier moved through, bumped a river by accident, and created one of the most dramatic landscapes in Pennsylvania. Nobody planned it. Fact 23. The coal train that invented the roller coaster. America's first roller coaster was not built for entertainment. The Mauch Chunk Switchback Railway, Carbon County, Pennsylvania, built in 1827 to move anthracite coal downhill using nothing but gravity. Loaded cars descended 936 feet over 9 miles, hitting 50 miles per hour on the way down. Sometime in the 1840s, somebody realized people would pay to ride the empty cars back up for the view. By the 1870s, it was a full tourist operation. In 1884, the design directly inspired the first purpose-built roller coaster at Coney Island. A coal logistics operation in rural Pennsylvania accidentally invented the theme park ride. Nobody planned that either. Fact 22. The cave that just became a state park. Laurel Caverns, Pennsylvania. Over 3 miles of passages, drops 446 feet, biggest cave in the state. And what makes it genuinely rare globally is what it formed inside. Most caves develop in limestone. Laurel Caverns formed in calcareous sandstone, making it one of the largest sandstone cave systems on Earth. On April 6, 2026, just a few months ago, it officially became Pennsylvania's 125th state park, the first underground state park in the state's history. A cave that's unusual on a global scale took until 2026 to get the recognition it deserved. Better late than never.
Fact 21. The town built on a fire that won't go out. Centralia, Pennsylvania, 1962. A routine landfill fire during a cleanup operation crept into a network of abandoned coal mine tunnels underneath the town. It never went out. The fire hit the Buck Mountain coal bed, 8 miles long, 300 feet deep, and ground temperatures eventually pushed past 900 degrees Fahrenheit. The town got evacuated. Roads buckled. Gas seeped up through yards and basements. Most buildings were demolished. A small number of residents refused to leave and fought legally to stay. Experts estimate the fire has enough coal remaining to burn for another 250 years. Centralia is a town that a fire outlived. Fact 20. The dig that started Dinosaur Mania. October 1858, Haddonfield, New Jersey. A fossil hunter named William Parker Falk is working a marl pit and pulls out bones, lots of them. Hadrosaurus falkii, 25 feet long, 7 tons, duck-billed, and at that point, the most complete dinosaur skeleton ever recovered. Complete enough to prove something nobody had confirmed before. Some dinosaurs walked on 2 legs, not 4, 2. In 1868, it was mounted and put on display at Philadelphia's Academy of Natural Sciences. First publicly exhibited dinosaur skeleton in world history. Every museum display you've ever walked past traces its origin back to a marl pit in New Jersey. Fact 19. The island that keeps getting bigger. Sable Island sits 180 miles off Nova Scotia, technically part of Nova Scotia, a 26-mile crescent of sand in the middle of the North Atlantic. No bedrock, no permanent trees, just dunes, grass, wild horses, and one of the most brutal stretches of ocean shipping has ever encountered. Over 350 shipwrecks documented around it, earned the name Graveyard of the Atlantic. And the island itself is moving, migrating northeast at roughly 230 feet per year as sand erodes from one end and deposits on the other. It's not shrinking, it's relocating. Has been for centuries. Fact 18. The sound that travels through solid rock. Ringing Rocks Park in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. 7 acres of scattered boulders that ring like bells when struck with a hammer. Not all of them. About 30% produce the sound. The others, thud. Nobody has a fully satisfying explanation for why certain rocks in this specific field ring, and others right next to them don't. Geologists have studied it since the 1800s. Best current thinking involves internal stress patterns in the rock from glacial deposition. But that explanation doesn't account for the selectivity. Why this boulder and not that one 6 inches away? People have been showing up with hammers and confusing themselves here for 150 years. Fact 17. The swamp that produces its own weather. The Great Dismal Swamp straddles Virginia and North Carolina. About 111,000 acres of what's left. It used to be nearly 1 million. George Washington surveyed it in 1763 and immediately formed a company to drain it. They spent decades trying. It mostly didn't work. What's inside is a peat-based ecosystem that generates its own localized microclimate. The moisture output from the vegetation alters temperature and humidity patterns directly above it. The swamp is large enough and wet enough to influence the weather sitting over it. Washington tried to drain it. It's still there, still making its own weather. Fact 16. The cave system under a major city. Luray Caverns, Virginia, discovered in 1878 when a local man noticed cold air coming out of a small hole in the ground on a warm August day. Cold air coming out of the ground in August means something big is underneath. Big was an understatement. Caverns stretching nearly a mile, ceilings hitting 10 stories, columns formed over millions of years. One of the largest cave systems in the eastern United States sitting under the Shenandoah Valley. And the stalactites in the cathedral room are used as a musical instrument. The stalakpipe organ, built in 1954, covers 3.5 acres and plays by tapping stalactites with rubber mallets. The largest natural musical instrument on Earth, underground, in Virginia.
Fact 15. The volcano Virginia forgot it had. Trimble Knob in Highland County, Virginia. A cinder cone volcano. Standing there, in Virginia. It last erupted around 48 million years ago, which is why nobody's particularly worried. But it's intact. The structure survived. Most volcanic features in the eastern U.S. eroded away completely. Trimble Knob didn't. It's one of the best preserved cinder cones in the entire Appalachian region. Virginia has a volcano. Most Virginians have never heard of it. Fact 14. The river that flows the wrong way. The New River is one of the oldest rivers in North America. Some estimates put it at 360 million years old, making it older than the mountains it flows through. It runs north instead of south through the Appalachians, which is backwards from most Appalachian drainage. The reason? The river predates the mountains. When the Appalachians rose up around it, the New River was already there, already established, and just kept cutting through the rising terrain rather than rerouting. The mountains grew up around a river that refused to change direction. It's been flowing north since before the dinosaurs.
Fact 13. The bay that formed from a space rock in North America. 200 miles long, draining 64,000 square miles of watershed, and sitting underneath its southern end, buried under 1.5 miles of sediment, is a 35-mile-wide crater. An asteroid or comet hit the area around 35 million years ago. The impact punched through the crust, created a massive cavity, and fundamentally altered the geology of the entire region. The crater is part of why the bay's southern end is where it is. The shape of the Chesapeake, the position of the mouth, influenced by a space rock impact 35 million years ago.
Fact 12. The mountain range older than dirt. The Appalachians are old. Not old in the way people mean when they call a building old. Old in the way that makes the Himalayas look recent. Current estimates put the initial formation of the Appalachians at around 480 million years ago, with major building phases happening again around 325 million years ago. At their peak, they likely rivaled the modern Himalayas in height. What's left now, the rounded, weathered ridges, is what 480 million years of erosion does to a mountain range. The Rockies are around 80 million years old. The Alps, 65 million. The Appalachians were already ancient when those mountains were just pressure building under the crust. Fact 11. The island that keeps its own time. Tangier Island, Virginia. Sitting in the Chesapeake Bay, accessible only by ferry or small plane. About 450 people live there, and the English dialect spoken on Tangier Island has been described by linguists as closer to 17th century British English than to any modern American accent. Isolated enough for long enough that the language preserved features that disappeared everywhere else centuries ago. Linguists have been coming to record it since the 1970s. The island is also sinking, losing about 15 feet of shoreline per year. The dialect that survived 400 years of isolation may not survive the century. Fact 10. The forest that predates human memory. Congaree National Park in South Carolina, the largest intact expanse of old-growth bottomland hardwood forest remaining in the southeastern United States. Some of the trees are over 500 years old. Loblolly pines reaching 167 feet. National champion trees, the tallest of their species anywhere, standing in a floodplain that floods so regularly most other ecosystems can't survive there. The floods are exactly why these trees survived. Too wet to log efficiently. Too inconvenient to develop.
The most significant old-growth forest left in the southeast exists because it was too much trouble to cut down.
Fact 9. The lighthouse built on sand that moved. Cape Hatteras Lighthouse. Tallest brick lighthouse in the United States at 198 feet. Built in 1870 specifically to warn ships away from Diamond Shoals, a stretch of shifting sandbars off the Outer Banks responsible for hundreds of shipwrecks. By the 1980s, the ocean had eaten its way to within 120 feet of the foundation. The lighthouse was going to fall into the sea. In 1999, engineers moved it. The entire 4,800-ton structure, 2,900 feet inland on a track system over 23 days. They moved a 198-foot brick lighthouse half a mile. It took 23 days. It worked.
Fact 8. The island nobody can own. No Name Key, Florida. Part of the Florida Keys, connected by a small bridge, and somehow, uniquely, it ended up as one of the few places in the Florida Keys where development never really took hold. The reason is partially bureaucratic, partially ecological, partially financial. Various ownership disputes and protection designations layered on top of each other over decades until the island became effectively undevelopable. The Florida Keys are among the most densely developed island chains in the country. No Name Key looks like it did 100 years ago. Accidents of paperwork preserved what aggressive development destroyed everywhere else. Fact 7. The sound you can hear underwater. Bioluminescent bays. There are only a handful in the world. Two of the best are in Puerto Rico. Mosquito Bay on Vieques, consistently rated the brightest bioluminescent bay on Earth, and La Parguera on the mainland. Disturb the water and it lights up. Blue-green fire from microscopic organisms called dinoflagellates reacting to movement. Kayak through it on a moonless night, and every paddle stroke leaves a glowing trail. Your hands glow when you pull them out of the water. Mosquito Bay has such a high concentration of dinoflagellates, sometimes 720,000 per gallon, that the effect is visible even in modest moonlight. Nothing prepares you for actually seeing it.
Fact 6. The rocks that are older than life itself. The Baltimore gneiss. Outcrops of it scattered through the Baltimore-Washington corridor. Some samples date to around 1.6 billion years old, among the oldest exposed rock on the entire East Coast. These rocks formed before multicellular life existed on Earth, before complex organisms of any kind. They sat through the formation of Pangea, its breakup, the rise of the dinosaurs, the asteroid that ended them, the ice ages, all of it. And now, they're in a suburban Maryland park, where people walk dogs past them without knowing. 1 billion years of planetary history, sitting next to a parking lot.
Fact 5. The forest fire that's still burning. The Centralia mine fire gets the press, but there's a peat fire in the Pocosin Lakes area of North Carolina burning underground in the organic soil itself that comes back every drought cycle and has been doing so for longer than any record exists. Peat fires burn slowly, deeply. They can smolder meters underground for months or years, invisible from the surface, then resurface during dry conditions. The 2008 fire in the area burned for over a month and consumed thousands of acres. The underlying peat that fed it has been accumulating for thousands of years. You can't fully extinguish a peat fire. You can only wait for rain.
Fact 4. The town that sits inside a meteor crater. Middlesboro, Kentucky, right on the Virginia border. Population around 9,000. A normal, small Appalachian town by any surface measurement. Except the entire town sits inside a meteor impact crater, roughly 3 miles across, formed about 300 million years ago. The circular valley that Middlesboro occupies, the way the hills curve around it, the unusual rock patterns that confused geologists for decades before 1966, when the impact origin was confirmed.
All of it traces back to a space rock. People have been living inside a crater for generations without most of them knowing what they're living in.
Fact 3. The coastline that's falling into the sea right now. Not gradually, not as a future projection, right now. Chesapeake Bay's eastern shore is losing ground at some of the fastest rates measured anywhere on the East Coast. Tangier Island losing 15 feet per year. Smith Island down to a few hundred permanent residents from thousands a century ago. The town of Holland Island in Maryland, once home to several hundred people with a main street, a school, a church, completely gone. The last house fell into the bay in 2010. Holland Island doesn't exist anymore. The people who grew up there watched it disappear in their lifetimes.
Fact 2. The sound the Earth makes when it breathes. The Seneca guns. A phenomenon documented along the East Coast, from New Jersey down through the Carolinas for centuries. A deep, resonant boom. No explosion, no storm, just a sound like a cannon fired somewhere offshore. George Washington reported it. Native American oral traditions reference it going back further. The USGS has studied it. Best current explanation involves microseismic activity, or submarine geological events. Essentially, the ocean floor shifting in ways that generate low-frequency sound waves. The Earth makes a sound, has been making it for centuries. Nobody has fully explained it yet.
Fact 1. The mountain that collects its own clouds. Mount Washington, New Hampshire, 6,288 feet, the highest peak in the northeastern United States. In April 1934, a weather station on the summit recorded a wind gust of 231 miles per hour, the highest surface wind speed ever recorded on Earth at that time. The record stood for 62 years. The mountain sits at the convergence point of 3 major storm tracks, funneling weather from different directions into one narrow summit. Average wind speed on the summit is 35 miles per hour. It has recorded temperatures below -40. The auto road to the top carries a bumper sticker that says, "This car climbed Mount Washington," which sounds modest until you understand what the mountain actually does to weather. The most extreme surface wind ever recorded on Earth happened on a mountain in New Hampshire. Not Antarctica, not the Himalayas. New Hampshire.
That's 50 facts. And look, the East Coast isn't the finished, settled place the history books make it out to be. It's still moving, still sinking, still burning underground in one Pennsylvania town, still making sounds nobody can explain off the Carolina coast. The geography didn't stop when the colonies showed up. It was never going to. Drop the one fact that got you in the comments. Just one. I want to know which one landed. And if this is the kind of content you want more of, subscribe. We've got the whole country left to cover.